Here's a strange thing that almost nobody stops to think about. The universe is, by almost any measure, absurdly, embarrassingly, almost offensively large. We're talking about roughly 93 billion light-years across. Somewhere between 2 trillion and 2 trillion individual galaxies floating inside it. Each galaxy holding hundreds of billions of stars. And around those stars, planets. Trillions upon trillions of planets. Now, here's the strange part. Life, as far as we know, needs exactly one of them. That's it. One planet, one star to warm it, one solar system to hold it together. Maybe, if you're being generous, one galaxy to supply the heavier elements that chemistry needs to get interesting, but that's it. One galaxy, one solar system, one planet. So why in the name of everything that makes physical sense does the universe need to be 93 billion light-years wide? Why does it need 2 trillion galaxies? Why does it need to be so jaw-droppingly, mind-bendingly, almost mockingly vast? Welcome to Feynman's Path. Today we're going to sit with this question properly, not dodge it, not dress it up in mystical language, not pretend the math conveniently answers it when it doesn't. We're going to do what Richard Feynman spent his whole career insisting we do. We're going to strip out the assumptions, follow the logic wherever it actually leads, and be honest about where it stops. And here's my promise to you. By the time we're done, the universe won't feel smaller, but it will feel different. And I think that difference might be one of the most quietly stunning things you'll take away from any conversation about physics this year. Let's start where we have to start, with a cup of coffee. Imagine you're standing in your kitchen on a Tuesday morning. Nothing dramatic. Maybe it's a little grey outside. You pour yourself a cup of coffee. You're barely awake. The steam rises off the mug in that slow, lazy spiral. You're just standing there. And for a second, just a second, you look out the window at the sky. Now, that sky you're looking at, that little patch of pale blue or overcast grey, that's the atmosphere, about 60 miles thick. Barely a rounding error on the scale of what we're actually talking about today. Below your feet is rock and iron, the solid earth, about 7,900 miles across. Big enough to drive around in a few weeks if roads wrapped around it, already feeling pretty large, right? But zoom out. Keep the coffee in hand, because you're going to need the comfort. The distance from Earth to the Sun is about 93 million miles. Sounds like a lot. Light makes that trip in about 8 minutes. 8 minutes of traveling at 186,000 miles per second. That's not a typo. Light crosses that distance, the distance your entire intuition says is enormous, in 8 minutes. Now stretch further. If you drew a circle at the edge of our solar system, roughly at Neptune's orbit, you'd need about 9 hours for light to cross it. 9 hours at the speed of light, just to get from one end of our local neighborhood to the other. Okay, still feels comprehensible maybe. Our solar system, our neighborhood. Fine. Now step back, way back. The nearest star to our sun, a dim little red dwarf called Proxima Centauri, is 4.24 light-years away. That means light, traveling at 186,000 miles per second, non-stop, takes 4 years and about 3 months to cover that distance. If you hopped in a commercial airliner and flew toward Proxima Centauri without stopping, not for fuel, not for snacks, not for anything, you would arrive in about 5 million years. 5 million years. And Proxima Centauri? In cosmic terms, it's basically next door. It's our nearest neighbor. We are talking about the equivalent of a 30-second walk to the corner store. Let that sit for a moment. Now pull the camera back further. Our entire galaxy, the Milky Way, is about 100,000 light-years across. It contains somewhere between 200 and 400 billion stars. And our sun, our entire solar system, with everything we've ever known and everyone who has ever lived, sits about 26,000 light-years from the galactic center, out in the suburbs, out in one of the spiral arms, far from the bright downtown. If the Milky Way were a city, we'd be living in a quiet neighborhood somewhere near the edge of town, not quite in the countryside, but definitely not downtown. And the Milky Way is one galaxy. The nearest large galaxy to ours, Andromeda, sits 2.5 million light-years away. Our local group, the little cluster of galaxies that includes us and Andromeda and a few dozen smaller companions, spans about 10 million light-years. Then there are galaxy clusters and superclusters, and the cosmic web, this enormous filamentary structure of matter and void that stretches across the entire observable universe like the neural network of some unimaginably vast brain. And the whole thing, everything we can possibly see with the most powerful telescopes ever built, everything that light from the Big Bang has had time to reach us from spans about 93 billion light years. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 trillion galaxies. Each one containing hundreds of billions of stars. Each star potentially hosting planets. Are you still holding that coffee mug? Good. Because here is where the strange part finally arrives. You don't look at all of that and feel a reasonable sense of proportion. You look at all of that and feel something closer to absurdity. Because here's the question that nags at you when the room gets quiet at night. Why is any of that necessary? If the universe's job, if we're allowed to use that word for a second, is to produce life, or intelligence, or beings capable of asking questions, then it has done so in the most spectacularly wasteful way imaginable. One planet out of what may be trillions. One solar system out of hundreds of billions. One galaxy out of 2 trillion. The rest of it? Mostly empty. Mostly dark. Mostly dead. The average density of the universe, if you spread all its matter perfectly evenly across all of space, works out to about 6 hydrogen atoms per cubic meter. 6 atoms in a space the size of a large living room. That's it. That's the universe. Predominantly, it is nothing. So, why is there so much nothing? Why is there so much of anything? Why, when one decent-sized galaxy would have done the job perfectly well, did physics produce 2 trillion? This is the question we're going to chase today. And I'll warn you now, we're going to follow it down several layers, and each layer is going to feel a little stranger than the last. That's not me being dramatic, that's just honestly how this works. Some of the most fundamental questions in cosmology don't have clean, satisfying answers. But the process of understanding why they don't have clean answers, that process itself, is one of the most extraordinary intellectual experiences you can have. Richard Feynman used to say something that I think about constantly. He said, and I'm paraphrasing his spirit here, because he said it in many ways across many lectures, he said that the first step to actually understanding something is admitting you don't understand it yet. Not pretending, not dressing up ignorance in confident-sounding language, admitting it, and then following the evidence with complete honesty to wherever it leads. That's what we're doing today. So, why is the universe so impossibly, absurdly, almost offensively large? Let's find out. The first answer you'll get, and it's a real answer, one that physicists actually believe, is inflation. To understand inflation, I need you to think about the very earliest moments after the Big Bang. And when I say early, I don't mean the first few seconds. I don't even mean the first fraction of a second. I mean a sliver of time so impossibly thin that our language doesn't really have a good word for it. In that window, in roughly the first 10 to the minus 32 seconds after the Big Bang, which is a number so small that writing it out is almost pointless, the universe didn't just expand. It ballooned. It inflated. It went from something smaller than a proton to something roughly the size of a marble in a time period that makes a nanosecond look like an eternity by comparison. And during that inflation, quantum fluctuations, tiny random tremors in the fabric of energy at the smallest possible scale, got stretched, blown up, magnified from subatomic scales to cosmological scales. Those stretched out quantum tremors became the seeds of everything, the slightly denser regions where matter would eventually clump, the precursors to galaxy clusters and cosmic filaments and the entire large-scale structure of the universe as we see it today. Now, the mathematical models for cosmic inflation work remarkably well. The predictions they make about the uniformity of the cosmic microwave background radiation, about the particular patterns of density variation we observe across the universe, about the geometry of space itself, these predictions match observations with stunning precision. So, inflation almost certainly happened. But, and here's where Feynman would lean forward in his chair, inflation tells us what happened. It doesn't tell us why it happened the way it did. Specifically, it doesn't explain why the inflaton field, the hypothetical energy field that drove inflation, released the specific amount of energy it did, expanding the universe to the specific scale it reached. It's a bit like asking why the river is so wide, and someone tells you because a lot of water flowed through it. That's true. That's actually the mechanism. But you were kind of hoping for something deeper. Inflation explains the shape. It explains the smoothness. It explains why the observable universe looks roughly the same in every direction. But it doesn't explain the scale in a way that feels satisfying. And here's a subtlety worth pausing on for a moment, because it changes how you think about the whole thing. The universe we can see, that 9.3 billion light-year sphere, is not the entire universe. It's just the part we can see. The boundary of the observable universe is defined by how far light has had time to travel since the Big Bang. It's a horizon. It's our cosmic horizon. Beyond that horizon, the universe continues. We don't know how far. We don't know if it has an edge. Many cosmologists believe it's infinite, that it goes on forever in every direction. If that's true, then asking why the universe is so large is mathematically equivalent to asking why infinity is so big, which is not actually a well-formed question. Let that one echo around for a bit. Okay, let's go a layer deeper. Because we've established the mechanism inflation, but the question of why it produced the universe at this particular scale still lingers. And to chase that, we need to talk about something that cosmologists call the anthropic principle. And I want to be careful here, because the anthropic principle gets misused a lot. People sometimes wave it around like a mystical trump card, like it's an explanation. It's not exactly an explanation. It's more of a logical constraint, but it's a genuinely important one. Here's the idea, stripped to its bones. We exist. That's a fact. You're here, listening to this, your neurons are firing, your heart is beating, and you have the remarkable capacity to think about the universe. That is the baseline fact. Now, what conditions are required for beings like us to exist? Well, you need planets made of complex chemistry. That means you need heavy elements, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, silicon, iron. Those elements don't exist at the beginning of the universe. They have to be forged inside stars. Stars have to live and die and explode and scatter those elements into space for the next generation of stars and planets to incorporate. That process takes time, a lot of it. We're talking billions of years, multiple generations of stellar birth and death. But here's the key connection. In an expanding universe, time equals size. The older the universe gets, the larger it gets. They're not just correlated, they're essentially the same measurement expressed differently. So if you need billions of years of stellar evolution to produce the chemistry that makes life possible, and if the universe is expanding during all of those billions of years, then by the time the universe is old enough for life to appear, the universe is already enormous. You cannot have a small, cozy, compact universe that's also old enough to have forged the elements that make up your body. The physics doesn't allow it. If the universe were young enough to still be small, it would be too young to have the heavy elements, the planets, the chemical complexity that life requires. This is the anthropic argument for the universe's size. Not that it was designed to be this big, but that any universe capable of producing observers who can ask, why is this so big, must already be at least this big by the time those observers show up. It's a strange kind of logic, but it's airtight. Think about it this way. Imagine you went to sleep one night and woke up somehow transported to a random location on Earth. You open your eyes and you're standing on solid ground. You might ask, why did I land on the ground rather than in the middle of the ocean? The ocean covers 70% of the planet. Statistically, shouldn't I have ended up in the water? The answer, of course, is that you couldn't have woken up in the middle of the ocean and then asked that question. The question itself only gets asked from dry land. The anthropic principle works the same way. The question, why is the universe so large, only gets asked from inside a universe that is large enough and old enough for life to have evolved. Universes that are too small or too young don't produce questioners. Now, I want to be clear about something here, because this is the kind of argument that sounds like it explains everything and actually risks explaining nothing. The anthropic principle tells us that observers like us are necessarily located in a region of the universe and a time in the universe's history where the conditions permit life. That's a logical truth. But it doesn't explain why those conditions exist in the first place. It doesn't explain why the fundamental constants of physics, the strengths of gravity, electromagnetism, the nuclear forces are tuned to the values they have, which happen to be exactly the values needed for stars, planets, and chemistry to exist. That's a separate and even deeper question, and it's one where the honest answer is, we don't fully know. Feynman was blunt about this kind of thing. He had no patience for explanations that dressed up gaps in knowledge as satisfying resolutions. He wanted the logic tested at every step, and if you test the anthropic principle rigorously, you find that it's a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient explanation. The universe had to be at least this large for us to be here. But it didn't have to be exactly this large, or exactly this structured, in the specific way it is. So we're left with something strange. A partial answer. A real one, but partial. Let me pause on the numbers for a second, because I think there's a particular way of looking at them that changes everything. The observable universe contains roughly 2 trillion galaxies. Let's just try to feel that number for a moment. If you started counting galaxies at 1 per second, one galaxy every second, no breaks, no sleep, just counting, you would reach 1 million in about 11.5 days. You'd reach 1 billion in about 32 years. And to count 2 trillion at 1 galaxy per second, you would need about 63,500 years. That's longer than written human history. And those are just the galaxies we can see, the ones inside our cosmic horizon. Now here's another way to feel the scale. Take all the matter in the observable universe, every atom of every star in every galaxy, and spread it perfectly evenly through all of space. You'd get about 6 protons per cubic meter. 6. A cubic meter is roughly the size of a large refrigerator. 6 protons floating in that space. The universe is almost perfectly empty. Everything we can see, all those galaxies, all those stars, amounts to tiny specks of slightly elevated density in an otherwise almost completely vacant expanse of space. And when I say empty, I mean empty in a way that's hard to sit with. The distances between stars within a galaxy are already staggering. The distance between galaxies is on a completely different order of magnitude again. The voids between galaxy filaments, those enormous stretches of near nothing that divide the cosmic web, can span hundreds of millions of light years. Just nothing. Not dark in the dramatic Hollywood sense. Just absence. So the universe isn't only large. It's predominantly empty. Mostly void. And the matter, for all its apparent abundance when you look at a photograph of a galaxy cluster, is almost vanishingly sparse when you zoom out to the full scale. Why so much emptiness? Part of the answer comes back to the pace of gravity. Gravity works slowly. It doesn't just slam matter together instantly. It pulls matter toward itself gradually, over millions and billions of years, across distances that light takes millions of years to cross. For galaxies to form, for galaxy clusters to assemble, for the great cosmic filaments to emerge from the initial quantum fluctuations, all of that takes enormous stretches of time, during which the universe is still expanding. The empty space isn't wasted space. It's working space. It's the arena in which gravity slowly does its job, assembling structure piece by piece across geological, cosmological timescales. But even understanding that, there's a persistent feeling that something about the scale is excessive. You can accept the physics and still feel the excess, and that feeling, I'd argue, is a healthy one. It's the feeling that you're genuinely confronting something that doesn't fit comfortably inside the human mind. Here is the part of this conversation that I think about the most. And I want to approach it carefully, because it involves a concept that sounds abstract but has a very concrete, almost eerie implication. Cosmologists think that the universe is expanding, not just that things are moving apart, which is how people usually think about it, but that space itself is stretching. The fabric of space-time is literally growing. Galaxies aren't moving through space away from each other. Space is growing between them, and the expansion is accelerating. Something we call it dark energy, which is really a name we gave to our ignorance, is driving this acceleration. The expansion is speeding up. And because it's accelerating, there is a horizon. There is a point beyond which the expansion of space is so fast that light emitted from there can never reach us. Those regions are receding from us faster than light can travel. Not because anything is moving faster than light, nothing is, but because the space between us and those regions is growing so rapidly that light can never bridge the gap. This means that the observable universe, our 9.3 billion light-year bubble, is not just the universe we happen to be able to see. It is the universe we will ever be able to see in the most absolute sense. The rest is not just distant, it's permanently disconnected from us. And here is the part that genuinely haunts me. In the far future, we're talking trillions of years from now, numbers that make the current age of the universe look like a blink. The expansion will have pushed almost every other galaxy completely beyond our horizon. The local group, our galaxy, Andromeda, and a handful of companions will have merged and settled into a single large elliptical galaxy. And beyond that merged remnant, there will be nothing visible. The cosmic microwave background radiation, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang that fills all of space today, that we can detect and map and study, will have been stretched to such enormous wavelengths by the expansion that it will be completely undetectable, gone. Not destroyed, just redshifted into invisibility. Now imagine a civilization evolving in that future universe. Intelligent beings, capable of curiosity and science, looking up at their sky. What do they see? They see their own galaxy, stars, a rich, complex, beautiful starscape. And beyond that, nothing. No other galaxies. No cosmic background radiation. No evidence that the universe is expanding. No evidence that anything else exists at all. So they develop their science. They study physics. They study astronomy. And they conclude, based on perfectly rigorous observations of everything they can possibly detect, that the universe consists of exactly one galaxy, theirs. That it is static. That it has always existed and will always exist more or less in its current form. That there was no Big Bang because there is no evidence of one. And they would be completely, utterly wrong. Not because they're unintelligent, not because their science is bad, but because the evidence has been erased, literally erased. Red shifted out of existence by the expansion of space itself. Now come back to the present, come back to right now. We are in the extraordinary, unrepeatable, cosmically brief window of time during which the evidence is still visible, during which the cosmic microwave background can still be detected, during which the expansion can still be observed by tracking the redshifts of distant galaxies, during which we can still measure the rate of acceleration and trace the whole story back to the Big Bang. This window doesn't stay open forever. It may have already been open for most of its duration, and we happen to live in it. We happen to be the beings who got to see the whole picture, or at least much of it, before time swallows the evidence. Now, was that planned? No. There's no mechanism in physics for planning that kind of thing. It's not a gift. It's a coincidence. In the most literal sense of the word, things happening to occur together. We exist at the right time in the universe's history to observe the universe's history. Not because someone arranged it, but because the alternative existing either too early, before complex chemistry, or too late, after the evidence has vanished, doesn't produce beings who can observe. Again, the anthropic shadow. The thing we can only look at from where we already are. But knowing that we live in this specific, precious, limited window of cosmic visibility changes how I feel about the universe's scale. Because from inside that window, looking out, the scale is not just enormous and inexplicable, it's an archive. All of it, every galaxy cluster, every quasar blazing 10 billion light-years away, every filament of the cosmic web is evidence. Evidence of a past we can still trace. A past that is right now written in light across the sky. For us. For this moment. Let me tell you about a night that permanently changed how I think about all of this. I was visiting a friend at a university, this would have been years ago now, and we'd been working late in his lab, arguing about some mathematical point that now seems impossibly trivial. We went outside for air. It was well past midnight. The campus was quiet. And because it was far enough from the city, you could actually see the sky. My friend called him Marcus. He was the kind of physicist who had spent so long doing math that he sometimes forgot to look up. He literally stopped walking when he looked up at the stars. Just stopped mid-step and tilted his head back. I said, "You okay?" He said, slowly, "Do you ever think about where the light comes from? Not physically." Like actually where? I thought about it. The star. The fusion reactions in the core. Right. So that light left that star. Some of those are thousands of light years away. Some of them might not even exist anymore. We're looking at them as they were, not as they are. And that light traveled across absolutely empty space for thousands of years, and then it hit your retina right now, tonight, in this specific moment. Yeah. So in a very specific physical sense, it waited. For us. It traveled all that way, and it arrived right now. I told him that was a very romantic way to describe photon propagation. He laughed, but he kept looking up. And then he said something I've never forgotten. He said, "The universe doesn't know we're here. It's not doing this for us. But if you're the kind of thing that can stand still and let the light hit you, and then think about where it came from, then you've turned a completely indifferent physical process into something that looks almost like a relationship." I didn't have a good response to that. He wasn't making a mystical claim. He's a physicist. He meant it precisely and literally. The photons propagate according to the equations. The eye evolved to detect them. The brain processes the signal and the consciousness emerges and makes meaning from it. No design required, no intention. Just the universe doing physics and producing somewhere in a very small corner, on a very specific night, the experience of being amazed. That's the anthropic principle wearing a human face. So here's a question that naturally grows out of everything we've said so far. And it's the one that I think takes us from science into something even stranger. Why are the laws of physics the way they are? Not why is the universe large, we've been circling that. But why does the universe have the specific rules it does? Rules that allow stars to form, rules that allow atoms to be complex enough for chemistry, rules that allow the long-chain molecules needed for biology. Because they didn't have to be this way. Let me be specific. There are roughly 24 fundamental constants of nature numbers that physics requires but cannot derive from deeper principles. The gravitational constant, the speed of light, the masses of quarks, the strength of electromagnetism, the fine structure constant. These numbers are what they are. We measure them. We plug them into our equations. We get predictions that match observations with extraordinary precision. But we have no theory, none that tells us why they have those specific values and not different ones. And here's the disturbing part. If you tweak those values even slightly, the universe that results is radically different. Not just different in details, different in ways that make any kind of structure or complexity or life impossible. Increase the gravitational constant by a significant factor, and stars burn through their fuel in a tiny fraction of the time. No long-lived stable stars. No planets with billions of years to develop life. Just fast-burning stars that explode long before chemistry has any chance. Change the ratio of the electromagnetic force to the strong nuclear force even slightly, and either protons can't form stable nuclei, or all hydrogen immediately fuses to helium in the early universe and there's no hydrogen left for stars later, no water, no organic chemistry. Change the cosmological constant, the value associated with dark energy, by a small factor, and either the universe collapses back on itself before galaxies can form, or it expands so violently and rapidly that matter can never clump together at all. The window of values that permits complexity, that permits stars, planets, chemistry, and eventually biology, appears to be genuinely narrow. Why? Why is the universe calibrated, if that's even the right word, in a way that permits complexity? There are a few possible responses to this, and I want to walk through all of them honestly, without pretending any of them are more settled than they are. The first response: coincidence. Just dumb luck. The universe happened to have these values, and here we are. No further explanation needed or possible. The problem with this isn't that it's wrong, it might be true. The problem is that it's epistemically unsatisfying in a way that serious physicists have a hard time accepting. When the odds of a particular outcome are astronomically small, pure coincidence starts to feel like an explanation you're reaching for because you don't have a better one. The second response: the multiverse. What if there isn't just one universe? What if the inflationary process that produced our universe is capable of producing many universes, perhaps infinitely many, each with different values of those fundamental constants? In that case, the fact that we're in a universe with life-permitting constants is not mysterious at all. We couldn't be in one of the vast majority of universes where the constants are wrong, because those universes don't produce beings capable of asking the question. The multiverse hypothesis is intellectually elegant. It also, at the moment, is completely untestable by any known method. We cannot observe other universes, we cannot interact with them. We cannot, with current physics, even predict what range of universes the multiverse would produce. This makes it a fascinating theoretical framework and essentially not science in the strictest empirical sense, at least not yet. Feynman would have had something pointed to say about that. The third response: we're missing something. There may be a deeper theory, something we haven't found yet, that actually derives those constants from first principles. A theory that explains why gravity has the strength it does, why the electron has the mass it does, why the constants are what they are. The same way general relativity explains why gravity curves space-time. If such a theory exists, the apparent fine-tuning disappears. The constants wouldn't be lucky, they'd be necessary. We don't have that theory yet. String theory was once hoped to be it, and might still be, but has so far produced an enormous landscape of possible universes rather than a unique prediction. The search continues. The honest answer, in 2024, is that we don't know which of these responses is correct. We have genuine, serious physicists who lean toward each of them, and none of them can yet be ruled out by experiment. What we can say is this: the question of why the constants are what they are is one of the deepest open questions in all of physics. And if it ever gets answered, if someone, someday, derives those numbers from a single coherent theory, that will be one of the most profound moments in the history of human thought. All right. Let's zoom back in for a moment, because I think we've been in the abstract long enough and I want to ground something. Here's what we actually know, laid out plainly. The universe is large because inflation made it large. That's the mechanism. Inflation stretched quantum fluctuations to cosmic scales, and the expansion of space continued for 13.8 billion years, producing the vast structure we see today. The universe is large enough for us to exist in it, because any universe that's old enough to have produced the heavy elements needed for life is necessarily also large. Time and size are locked together in an expanding universe. The universe appears to be fine-tuned in a way that permits complexity, but we don't know why the fundamental constants have the values they do. The multiverse offers a possible explanation, but it's currently beyond the reach of experiment. A deeper underlying theory might derive the constants from first principles, but we don't have that theory yet. And the vast majority of the universe, the 9.3 billion light-year observable sphere, plus whatever lies beyond, is empty, mostly void, occasionally punctuated by matter. The emptiness isn't waste. It's the working medium of gravity, the arena in which structure assembles slowly over billions of years. That's what the physics tells us. But now I want to tell you what none of that physics tells us, and why that matters. When I try to really hold the scale of the universe in my mind, not as a number, not as a fact, but as something I'm actually trying to feel, something interesting happens. It doesn't make me feel small. Well, it does, in the obvious sense. Of course it does. I'm a collection of atoms arranged into a person standing on a rock orbiting a star in a galaxy that is 1 of 2 trillion. The physical smallness is not in question. But there's a different thing that happens beyond that, a shift in frame. When I look at a picture of the cosmic web, that enormous filamentary structure stretching across hundreds of millions of light years, with galaxy clusters at the nodes and vast voids between the filaments, I'm struck by how it looks like something familiar. Like the neural network of a brain seen under a microscope, like the mycelial network of a forest viewed from above. Now, I'm not suggesting the universe is conscious. I'm not making that argument. That would be dressing up ignorance in mystical language, which is exactly what we agreed not to do today. But the resemblance is pointing at something real. Complex networks that emerge from simple rules tend to produce similar geometric patterns, regardless of scale. The physics of gravity and dark matter produces filaments and nodes because that's what you get when you apply those forces across those distances over those timescales. The physics of neurons produces branching networks because that's what you get when you optimize information transfer under biological constraints. Different physics, different scales, similar patterns. There's a word for that. Universality, and it's one of the more genuinely beautiful ideas in physics. The idea that certain structural patterns are so fundamental emerge so inevitably from basic mathematics that they appear across entirely different systems at entirely different scales. The universe is not a brain, but it follows rules. And rules, consistently applied across vast scales and vast times, produce structure. Structure that, looked at from the right angle, is breathtaking. Here's the deepest shift I want to offer you, and this is the one that I think is genuinely worth sitting with after this conversation ends. We've been asking, why is the universe so large? But there's a hidden assumption in that question, a buried premise that we haven't examined yet. And examining it changes everything. The assumption is this, that the universe has a size that needs to be justified, that there is some natural, reasonable expected size that the universe should have been, and anything larger than that requires an explanation. But where does that expectation come from? It comes from us, from our intuitions, from the fact that we evolved on a planet in conditions where the meaningful scales of distance are meters and kilometers, and maybe for the most geographically ambitious among us, thousands of kilometers. Our intuitions about what's big and what's too big were calibrated for a world where crossing a mountain range felt like a significant journey. The universe did not calibrate itself to our intuitions. It calibrated itself to nothing. It has no obligation to fit inside our sense of proportion. It is what physics produced. And physics, operating across 13.8 billion years of time, produces something that looks, from the inside, enormous. But from the universe's perspective, if we can even use that phrase, there is no perspective. There is no outside view from which the universe looks large or small. It just is. Extent without reference point. The universe is not large, from the universe's point of view. It's not small either. It just has the extent it has, the result of the physics that governs it. The largeness is something we add. We bring the smallness, our smallness, and hold it up against the universe, and call the comparison overwhelming. But the overwhelming feeling is ours. It lives inside the experience of being a small, complex, evolved creature, trying to grasp something that was never designed to be graspable. There's no reason, in the sense of a rational justification, for the universe to be exactly 93 billion light-years across, but there's also no reason for it to be any other size. There's no naturally expected size. There's just whatever the physics produces. And here is the thing I find most striking about this. The universe produces what it produces, blindly, indifferently, following the laws of physics with perfect fidelity, with no awareness of outcomes, no preference for complexity over simplicity, no investment in the result. And somewhere in one tiny corner of it, the result includes this. A creature that evolved on a rocky planet, that developed the capacity for abstract thought, that invented mathematics and built telescopes and detected the faint echo of creation and worked out the history of space and time, and that now sits somewhere and genuinely feels, a sense of wonder at what it has found. The universe didn't make that for us. It didn't make anything for us, but it made the conditions in which we could appear and ask about it. And that specific fact is not nothing. Let me tell you something about carbon. Your body is largely made of it. Every organic molecule, every protein, every strand of DNA, every cell membrane is built on a carbon backbone. Without carbon chemistry, life as we know it is impossible. Carbon was not present at the beginning of the universe. In the first few minutes after the Big Bang, the period cosmologists call Big Bang nucleosynthesis, the conditions were right to fuse protons and neutrons into light nuclei, hydrogen, helium, and trace amounts of lithium. That's it. 3 elements. No carbon, no oxygen, no iron, no calcium, no phosphorus. The heavier elements, all of them, everything beyond lithium, were forged inside stars. Nuclear fusion in stellar cores built up heavier and heavier nuclei, layer by layer, as stars lived and died. And then, at the end of a star's life, in the explosion of a supernova or in the slower exhalation of a dying red giant, all those elements were scattered into space. That material drifted through the galaxy for millions of years. Eventually, gravity pulled it into new nebulae, new star-forming regions. New stars formed, with new planetary disks, incorporating those scattered heavy elements. And on some of those new planets, in some of those new solar systems, chemistry happened. Complex chemistry, organic chemistry, eventually, biology. You are made of the ashes of dead stars. That's not a metaphor. It's a precise physical statement. The carbon in your cells was forged in the core of a star that died before our solar system existed. The iron in your blood was produced in a supernova explosion that scattered matter across light years of space, which eventually found its way across billions of years and billions of miles into the planet you were born on, and then into you. Every atom in your body has a history that stretches back billions of years. Every one of them has traveled through the cores of dying stars, through the vast emptiness of interstellar space, through the accretion disk of our forming solar system, through the geochemical cycles of the early Earth. And now they're arranged temporarily, beautifully, improbably, into something that is listening to this sentence and thinking about the universe. The universe made the stars. The stars made the elements. The elements made you. And you looking back at the universe are the universe looking at itself. Not in a mystical sense, in a precise, literal, physical sense. Let me bring in Feynman one more time here, because this is exactly the kind of thing he loved, the place where the poetry and the physics are saying the exact same thing. Feynman used to demonstrate this in lectures. He'd pick up a glass of water, just a plain glass of water, and he'd say something like, "I want you to understand what this is. This is not just water. This is an enormous collection of molecules, each one consisting of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, all in constant motion, constantly colliding with each other, and with the glass pushing on it in every direction with extraordinary force. And somehow the whole system is in equilibrium and the water stays in the glass. And those oxygen and hydrogen atoms were made in stars. And the glass was made from silicon and oxygen, and those atoms were also made in stars. Everything you see in this room, the glass, the water, me, you, is material that spent the first billions of years of its existence in the cores and the debris fields of stars. He'd look at the glass, and he'd be genuinely, visibly moved by it. Not because he was romanticizing science, because to him, the actual physical facts were more beautiful than any romanticization. The real story was better than any story you could make up. And I think that's the key insight that earns Feynman his place as the patron saint of this kind of thinking. Not that he was humble about what we don't know, though he was, but that he was completely unguardedly delighted by what we do know. By the fact that you could look at a glass of water and see 13.8 billion years of cosmic history. By the fact that the same equations that describe the behavior of quarks inside atomic nuclei also describe the structure of the cosmic web spanning billions of light years. The universe isn't large for no reason, in the sense of existing without any causal history. It has a very specific causal history. We've spent the last hour tracing parts of it, but it's also not large for a purpose. It didn't scale itself to anything. It just followed the rules. And the rules, for reasons we only partially understand, produced a universe with the specific chemistry and the specific constants and the specific scale that allowed, eventually, here, now, us. There's one more thing I want to address before we close, because I think it's the question that actually keeps people up at night, underneath all the physics. It's not really why is the universe so large. It's, does it matter that I'm so small? And I want to be careful here. I don't want to give you a cheap answer. I don't want to say, of course you matter, you're special, in a way that ignores the actual physics and just makes you feel temporarily better. Here's what the physics actually says. By any measure of size, you are vanishingly small. Your entire lifetime, measured against the 13.8 billion years of cosmic history, is far less than a blink. Your body, measured against the scale of the universe, is negligibly tiny. By mass, by spatial extent, by duration, you are almost nothing. That's true. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But here's what's also true. Size and duration are not the only measures of significance. They're not even the primary measures. From a physical standpoint, complexity is a measure. And by the measure of complexity, the number of distinct states a system can inhabit, the richness of its interactions, the amount of information it can encode, process, and express, your brain is the most complex thing we've ever encountered in the universe. Not slightly, not marginally, by a factor that dwarfs any comparison. The neural network in your skull has roughly 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others, producing a system of staggering informational richness. We have no evidence, anywhere in the 9.3 billion light-year observable universe, of anything that approaches this level of organized complexity. That doesn't mean nothing else this complex exists. It might. We haven't searched much of the universe yet, but it means that by the measure that matters not size, but organization, not duration, but information, you are not small. You are extraordinary. The universe spent 13.8 billion years, made stars, exploded them, scattered their elements, assembled new solar systems, waited billions of years more for chemistry to get interesting, waited billions more for biology to get interesting, and produced, in one corner of one galaxy, something capable of reconstructing its own history. That doesn't feel like nothing. Let me leave you with an image. Not a formula, not a graph, just an image. Imagine you're standing outside on a clear night, the kind of clear that you only get well away from the city, where the Milky Way is visible as an actual band of light across the sky, not just a metaphor. You look up. The light hitting your eyes right now left those stars hundreds, thousands of years ago. Some of what you're seeing is light that traveled toward you for longer than human civilization has existed. It left those stars before anyone had invented writing, before cities existed, before agriculture, and it has been flying through the absolute emptiness of space ever since, in a perfectly straight line, for thousands of years. And it arrived at this precise moment, at your eyes. The universe didn't aim it at you. The universe doesn't aim anything at anything. The photons propagated in all directions, and you happen to be standing in the path of these particular ones at this particular moment. But you're here. You're looking. You have the capacity to understand what you're looking at least partially, at least enough to feel the weight of it. And that weight, that strange, quiet, almost vertiginous sense of scale pressing down on you, that's not a sign that you're insignificant. That's what it feels like when complexity becomes aware of itself. When the atoms that came from stellar explosions, having spent billions of years being shuffled through geological and biological processes, arrive at a configuration that can look back at the stars and feel something. The universe is enormously, absurdly, almost offensively large. We've gone through the real reasons for it. Inflation, expansion, anthropic constraints, the slow pace of gravity, and none of them resolve into a neat, satisfying answer. The universe is large because it is. Because the physics that produced it operated for a very long time on very large scales, and nobody told it to stop. But somewhere inside all of that, somewhere in this one galaxy, on this one planet, in this one brief flash of time, the universe produced something that can ask the question. And the fact that you're asking it? That might be the most remarkable thing in 93 billion light years. Thank you for following this all the way through. I know we covered a lot of ground today, and not all of it landed in tidy conclusions, but that's the honest version. That's what physics actually looks like when you don't edit out the uncertainty. If something here stuck with you, a question, an image, an idea you want to chase further, I hope you'll let it stay with you for a while. Take it on a walk. Think about it before you fall asleep tonight. That's what these ideas deserve. And I'll see you in the next one.